ahead, you'll see that on April 18th and 20th, it says upper limb, lower limb flex day. What that is that at the beginning of the semester, I build in a week in case there's some snow, there's some weather where we get delayed, okay? That didn't happen this year. So we have an extra week. Now, we go through the upper limb in a week, and we go through the lower limb in a week, in a day, in an hour and a half, basically. So it's really kind of an overview of the entire limb. So there's no way that we can go into the detail that we would like. So the way we will treat this flex day this year for both the lab and the lecture is that we will get through upper limb today, we'll get through lower limb next week, and then that flex week will be 100% optional for you guys, okay? I will be here to hold a review for the lecture on Tuesday, and I will be in lab to hold a review if you guys want to look at structures on that Thursday. You do not have to show up. You're adults. It's getting warmer. I get it, okay? But I will be here, okay? If you guys want to show up, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. All I would ask is, if you guys don't mind, just shoot me an email to let me know, okay? I don't want to be hanging around up here for 15, 20 minutes, nobody shows up. Then I'll leave and somebody rolls in at, 10 till or whatever. I'm like, where are you at? I just don't want that to happen. So if you guys talk, maybe after next week, after the lower limb, if you guys feel like you have a decent grasp on it, if you don't think you're going to be here, that's fine. Just let me know. If you think you will be, that's fine. Just let me know. Does that sound cool? Yeah?
My father made some wood.
Oh, you gonna blame him? Okay.
Yeah, well, it was his fault. I
Alright,
mean,
keep
this
going.
wouldn't make any sense if you think about it. He
Alright.
made like a wood pallet for the washing machine to sit on. Like, I don't understand what the purpose of that was now that I think about it.
But I'm not gonna get into your business. All right. So you tripped over a wooden washing machine pallet and broke your pallet. That's the first thing. I never heard of that. What did happen? How painful was it?
I don't remember.
You don't remember, so she has to mention it. So that's what it would be right there. Broke your pallet, you mentioned. All right. So you broke it. I didn't see you raise your hand, so you can't. No, where it becomes, the reason I was asking about the pain level is that where it becomes problematic is that since it does hold the limb free from the body, depending on where you break it, the limb wants to hang or wants to sag. So then it's pulling constantly on that break. Since that is the only bony attachment up here, where considering where the break is at, you get more pull, you get more sag on the limb. Okay? So it helps to hold the limb free from the body. But it also helps to provide an area for muscular attachment. So that's number two. Hold the limb free from the body is one, muscular attachment is two. The deltoid, again, we've mentioned deltoid in 3 different places already. Okay, so the deltoid stretches across here. There's also the pec major. You've also got a muscle called the subclavius, which is neatly tucked just under the clavicle. That's the name. So it allows this area for muscular attachment. But also the third, arguably the most important function, is that it transmits forces from the upper limb to the rest of the body. I don't know what just happened. It's like I say, this might be the most important, and this chime happens. Okay, it's Tuesday, let's just keep
Transmits.
Can you say it again?
transmits forces from the upper extremity to the rest of the body. Now, how that works is this. You go up and you knock on the door, you think nothing of that, right? But when you knock on the door, you're transmitting the force of the knock into your digits, okay? So at that point, you have vibrations, you have forces that have now entered your upper extremity. We think nothing of it, okay? But those forces travel up your forearm, up your arm, across the clavicle, and then get spread throughout the rib cage. Okay? So what we're saying here is this. Think about it this way. Have you guys seen these idiots that lay down on a bed of nails? Are you one of those idiots that's ever done that? Have you done it? Raise your hand if you've done it, actually. All right, so what happens? They lay down on a bed of nails, they get up, there's not a drop of blood. Why is that?
Wide distribution of pressure.
What's that?
Wide distribution of pressure.
Yes, you are taking the weight and evenly distributing it across the bed of the nails, right? What happens if you have one nail and you lay down on it? Osteotomy, see in the lab, right? You don't want to take it. Because all of the weight is focused on the tip of that one nail, so it would puncture. Okay? So the way this works, instead of having just one bony attachment at the SC joint, it takes all those forces and then spreads them throughout the ribs, throughout the costal cartilages, throughout the sternum, throughout the vertebral column, because we've already talked about how the ribs attach to the vertebral column. And then that takes the forces down towards the pelvis as well, which then connects down to the lower extremity. So we're kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit, but I think you see the idea is taking the forces from here and then evenly distributing it throughout the body. Things that happen every time you take a step, every time you knock on the door, every time you shake hands with somebody, every time you high five, whatever. Those forces are being distributed throughout the body, and it's all because of the clavicle at the SC joint. So the clavicle doesn't often get a lot of love, but it's holding the bowl of soup is supination, pouring it out is pronation. Okay? Supination and pronation. That takes place at the elbow, but not so much with the trochlea and not so much with the ulna. That takes place between the radius and the capitulum. So that's why you have that gap in between the two. The very top part of the head of the radius actually is concave. Okay, so it's caved in a little bit. And that makes sense because the capitulum is rounded, it's convex, it sticks out. So the head of the radius wraps around the capitulum. So whenever you pronate and supinate, you're rotating the head of the radius around the capitulum. Okay? So you can hold your arms straight out, pronate and supinate. You can flex them at the elbow. You can still pronate and supinate. So that all tells you that you have two different actions that are taking place. You have the true hinge with the ulna and the trochlea, but you also have the pronation and supination with the radius and the capitulum. Okay, so two different actions are taking place. We mentioned this just a second ago, but you can't see it from this view, but again, the head of the radius, the very top part of it, is a little bit concave that way it articulates the capitulum. Whereas you look at the proximal part here, the ulna, the trochlear notch. This is the portion that articulates the trochlear to the humerus, giving you that true hinge aspect to the elbow joint. Now, the radial tuberosity is a proximal raised piece of bone that you see on the radius. The purpose of that is for the insertion of the biceps. Okay, the biceps brachii. Part of it inserts here, part of it inserts over on the ulna. But the biceps brachii, of course, is a big flexor that we have in the anterior department of the arm. And we'll go over the muscles in more detail a little bit later. That's the radial tuberosity. So if you're looking for an example of a second level question on this exam, it could be tagging the radial tuberosity, but asking which muscle inserts. Okay, you would say biceps brachial. Now on the proximal portion of the ulna, you also have a tuberosity. This is called the ulnar tuberosity. There's a deeper muscle in the arm that attaches here. A little bit of the biceps does as well, but there's a bigger, deeper muscle called the brachialis. We'll see that later. But it has a true insertion more on that ulnar tuberosity. Now once you reach the shaft of both of these bones, you'll notice they look fairly similar. They both have a interosseous border or a ridge that sticks up. And those two ridges will face each other. So if you think of anatomical position, those ridges are pointing towards the middle of the forearm. Okay? And the purpose of those ridges is to allow the interosseous membrane to connect to each other on either side. Okay, so you have this one membrane that connects to both of these ridges and then runs all the way through the forearm down towards the wrist. The purpose of the interosseous membrane is to be an area for muscular attachment. A lot of origins take place all along that interosseous membrane. Okay? There's also an opening distally in the membrane. There's also an opening proximally in the membrane. And the purpose of those openings is to allow for things like nerves, arteries, veins, lymphatics to pass back and forth to the anterior or back to the posterior side of the forearm. But you have two different little holes, a distal hiatus and a proximal hiatus, in that interosseous membrane that allow those things to pass back and forth. And then distally, you'll notice that the ulna is fairly small, and it has a tiny little styloid process that sticks out at the end. The styloid process is an area where you have some ligaments that attach to help give support to the wrist on the medial side. But in reality, when you do this, the thumb is extended. The digits, when you do this, are extended, the second through the fifth digit. Okay? So what happens here is that since the saddle joint for the thumb is rotated about 90 degrees different, all actions associated with the thumb, flexion, extension, etc., are 90 degrees different from the second through the fifth digit. So the thumb actions look a lot different than the digits for the second through the fifth. Okay, keep that in mind as we go through. But the metacarpals, the physical metacarpal itself, looks pretty much identical for the thumb, second, third, fourth, and fifth digit. Now at that point, we reach the phalanges for both the thumb and the second through the fifth digit. You are introduced to this row of joints. This is called the MCP, metacarpophalangeal joint. MCP, metacarpophalangeal joint. So whenever you make a fist like you're going to punch somebody, you're exposing that metacarpophalangeal joint. Now let's focus on the second through the fifth digit just for a second. You'll notice that you have 3 different bones for the phalanx, which means you have 2 joints. These joints are now called interphalangeal because they are separating the phalanx. There is a proximal row of these joints, which we call proximal interphalangeal or PIP, PIP, proximal interphalangeal joints. That's your door knocking knuckles. Tip joint is your door knocking knuckles. So since these guys are called proximal, that means this row must be distal. That is your dip, distal interphalangeal joint. Okay, so the second through the fifth digit has both a pip and a dip joint, proximal and distal interphalangeal joint. But now for the thumb, again, the thumb is different. It doesn't have 3 bones to it, there's just 2. So there is no proximal joint, there is no distal, it's just an IP joint. It's just interphalangeal thumb. Okay? Enough of the bone, right? Now the arteries. We're going to talk about the arteries for the upper extremity. I will tell you up front, there's a lot of them. We are going to hit the big picture roadmap. All right, big picture roadmap. At this point, we are looking at the brachiocephalic coming off the arch of the aorta. It's hidden just a little bit, but brachiocephalic splits into its 2 structures. You guys remember? The right lung carotid and the right subclavian. Okay? So the right subclavian travels along, and once it passes the first rib, it simply changes names to axillary. Now, axillary, axilla is the fancy word for armpit. So we're talking about the major blood supply to the armpit and the structures associated within the armpit. So what I want us to focus on here just for a second is that the axillary artery is divided into 3 different portions. Okay? Big picture, the axillary artery has 3 different portions. Off of the first portion, there's 1 major artery. Off of the second portion, there's 2 major arteries. And off of the third portion, there's 3 major arteries. So it's a neat setup how this works. First portion has 1, second portion has 2, third portion has 3. What I want us to focus on right now are just the borders for the axillary artery. Did you have a question? Did you have a question?
No.
I want us to focus just on the borders for the axillary artery right now, subdividing it into 3 different pieces. So we already said that the beginning of the axillary artery is once the subclavian crosses the first rib. So that's our first border, is the first rib. And then you'll also see that the pectoralis minor, stretching across from the ribs, has its attachment there to the coracoid process. So the pectoralis minor plays a role in all 3 of these portions. Any other questions about the arteries? We got one slide on veins. Now, for those arteries, most of these arteries have a vein that has the same name, so we're not going to go through the whole process and talk about the deeper veins. The only catch to those deeper veins is that you don't oftentimes just see one major vein running through the artery. So something like a brachial artery, fairly large structure, travels through the arm. It's got two smaller veins that run parallel to it on either side and work their way back up. Okay, so you don't always just have one big artery right beside of one big vein. A lot of times with these deeper structures, you'll see two small veins running parallel to each other on either side of the vessel, on either side of the arm. However, for the superficial veins, there's a little bit of a different setup. The superficial veins actually start on the back of the hand. You'll see down here, there's actually an arch on the back side of the hand called the dorsal venous arch, which tells you it's on the back side. It's an arch of vein, dorsal venous arch. So you got a lot of these digital veins working their way back, draining into and forming that dorsal venous arch. And then from that arch, you have two major veins that are formed that work their way back upstream. The one on the thumb side is called cephalic. The one on the pinky side is called basilic. Cephalic or cephalic just means head, so the cephalic vein is the one that travels the longest distance up towards the head. Basilic dives deep about mid-arm. Okay, it dives deep about mid-arm and drains into the deeper set of veins that we have. In that case, since we're in the arm, it would be the brachial vein. Right? Cephalic continues upstream, goes along an area called the deltoidal groove that you see here. It's that groove in between the deltoid and the neck major, so it forms this trough. Cephalic continues along that trough. Before it dives deep, dumps into the axillary vein, because that's the main vein for the axilla, the axillary vein. So all this is showing you is that you do have superficial set of veins, you have a deeper set of veins, but at some point, they all get mixed together, because all of that blood still has to go back through the right atrium, right ventricle, out to the lungs to become oxygenated, come back to the heart to continue its process. So something like a splinter, you get a splinter in your finger, okay? It's not too deep, but you can still introduce infection to your finger. So what you're doing is you're getting that superficial set of veins. So then you're taking that infection in the superficial set of veins, and eventually, you see the road map, eventually it will work its way back to the deeper set of veins, back to the heart. Okay, so of course both sets, the superficial and the deep, are important to us. Just superficial, you think more of just superficial injuries. Think of those case like a splinter. You step on a nail, it just barely pierces the skin. It doesn't hit that deeper set, but it does hit superficial veins. Yeah, that's why you have to go back and get tetanus shots. But all of these veins end up getting mixed back together, either mid-arm by way of the basilic, or all the way up in the axilla by way of cephalic. Now rotate it up. Or I'm sorry, brachial plexus. Who has studied brachial plexus before? Slowly raising your hand. Couple over there. Brachial plexus, you can spend a week on the brachial plexus easily. It's very, very not complicated or complicated. So, what we're going to do is talk about the big picture setup of the brachial plexus. Who knows who Randy Travis is? Kind of like, hey, Randy Travis. Anybody know Randy Travis? Anybody know any friends with the initials RT? All right, follow me here. Randy Travis. He's a country music gospel singer, right? So the way we work with this is we say Randy Travis drinks cold beer. RTDCB. Randy Travis drinks cold beer. If you understand that Randy Travis drinks cold beer, you can learn the brachial plexus. Because there's 5 major steps to the brachial plexus. Roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches. We use Randy Travis because he's a gospel singer. He got busted for DUI about 3 years ago. He's got an awful mug shot. He's got a black eye. I think he got rubbed up a little bit. He deserved it. So anyway. But Randy Travis drinks cold beer. Roots, trunks, divisions, cords, branches. That's the 5 major steps for the brachial plexus. Now start at the roots. Okay, we're going to talk about the formation, the big picture formation of the brachial plexus. Start at the roots. What are we talking about? The roots are the roots from C5 through T1. C5 through T1. You guys remember the phrenic nerve? What was the formation of a phrenic?
3, 4, 5.
C345 keeps the diaphragm alive, right? So C345. That same C5 root that gave you 1/3 of the phrenic nerve is now beginning the brachioplexus. So it is possible to damage the C5 root and have a little bit of upper limb trouble and respiration trouble. Interesting, right? Now, not just are we saying C5 through T1, what are we talking here? We're talking ventral primary Rayman. Let's take it all the way back to the spinal cord. Remember, we have the mixed nerve, and the purpose of that mixed nerve is to mix motor from the ventral and sensory from the dorsal. And then that forms ventral dorsal primary Rayman. So we are looking at the ventral primary Rayman that has both motor and sensory from C5 through T1. Okay? You'll see that C5 and C6 merge together at that circle. That circle has a nickname. It's called Erb's Point. ERB. Erb's Point. C5 and 6 merge at Erb's Point. There's a clinical condition called Erb's palsy. Because if you damage Erb's Point, you damage the nerve, the muscle from that point forward.
Where is this at?
I'm sorry?
Where is this at?
Erb's palsy is the circle right here where C5 and C6 merge
Okay.
together. C7 continues by itself. And then you'll also notice that C8 and T1 merge down around the first rib. But there's not a clinical name like Erb's Point because that area is a little bit more hidden because of muscles called the scalene muscles, the anterior and the middle scalene of the posterior triangle of the neck. Right? So C5 and C6 is a little bit more exposed, so that's why you have a few more clinical implications with Erb's Point. So 5 roots, C5, C6 merge together at Erb's Point, C7 is by itself, C8 and T1 also merge together, but no fancy name. So that at this point we're done with the roots, and now we have trunks. So we've gone from 5 roots to 3 trunks. Simply called a superior middle inferior or an upper middle lower. Okay, 5 and 6 merge together at Erb's Point. That's just the physical merger of those 2 roots. At that point, you have the upper trunk. C7 did not merge with anything, so it just continues as the middle trunk. C8 and T1 merge together, forming that lower trunk. So 5 roots down to 3 trunks. Now this is where it gets a little haywire, the divisions. You'll notice that I colored in some of these divisions, and some of this stuff I didn't color in. Okay, there's a method to the madness. What happens here is that each of these 3 trunks, the upper, middle, lower trunk, will split into 2 structures. An anterior division and a posterior division. Now the posterior division I colored in, so that way you can kind of keep everything from the posterior division on downstream, you can keep all of that together. You'll notice that all 3 posterior divisions will eventually merge together. But the anterior divisions, they all don't merge together. The anterior division from the upper and the middle merge together, but the lower just continues by itself. You guys following me here? So once we finish with the divisions, now what? Down to the chords? So we have we have a lateral, medial, and a posterior chord. What's happening here is this. All 3 posterior merge together, the posterior division merge together, and that forms the posterior chord. The anterior division from the upper and the middle, that forms the lateral chord. And the anterior division from the lower just continues by itself, and that forms the medial chord. start with the posterior, because it's colored in, it's a little bit easier to see. So the posterior cord will split into two major structures, two terminal branches, a radial and an axillary. Now for the radial, you can also call that the extensor nerve, because it innervates almost all of the extensors of the upper extremity. Okay, the radial nerve is nicknamed the extensor nerve. Axillary nerve is named that because it stays in the axilla. It doesn't travel downstream very far at all. It helps to give blood supply to the deltoid. It gives innervation to the deltoid. It also gives innervation to teres minor, which is one of the four rotator cuff muscles. We'll see those in a little bit. Okay, so the axillary and radial are all off of the posterior cord, which are all coming from posterior divisions. Now for the other portion of the brachial plexus, we call this the M, the capital M of the brachial plexus. So you'll see this looks like an M. So the M is coming from the lateral and medial cord, which is coming from the anterior divisions. And that M, if you look at it from lateral to medial, the first one you see is called the musculocutaneous. The name tells you muscle skin nerve. So musculocutaneous, big picture, innervates the anterior compartment of the arm. Musculocutaneous, the anterior compartment of the arm. And then after it's done its muscle part, it's still got to do its skin part, it becomes sensory downstream. Okay, let's focus on the motor stuff for now. Musculocutaneous, anterior compartment of the arm. The other two that are left are the median and the ulnar. Median comes off right in the middle. The ulnar comes off more on the medial side. So you'll notice again that you have two of these cords, the lateral medial cord, but they split, forming three terminal branches. Okay, you guys see that? That's how you get the M. The median, the ulnar, they're destined for the forearm and the hand. Median does a lot of the forearm, ulnar does a lot of the hand. There is some spillover, but big picture. Median nerve forearm, ulnar nerve hand. Now what's the point? What's the point of all of this splitting and weaving together and splitting again? What are we doing here besides just listening to me blabber on about stuff? What's the point of the brachial plexus? Why not just C5 just go down and do one thing or one group? Why not C6 just go down and do one thing?
To integrate reflexes?
Say again.
To integrate like reflexes?
There is some reflex aspect to it, but let's talk even more broad.
Is it backup?
Even more bigger picture.
Is it backup at all?
It's a backup, that's exactly right. So like if C5 gave us musculocutaneous, just C5, we said musculocutaneous is the innervation for the anterior compartment of the arm. You lose C5, you've lost all function for the anterior side of the arm. This way you have nerves coming in from different routes, so hopefully you don't damage it. But if you damage one, there is a backup. And then in a lot of these cases, you'll see on the terminal branches, it shows you a median, C5, C6, C7, C8, T1. It's kind of a big deal. It's got 5 different roots coming together to form that nerve. So odds are if you damage C6, you're not going to have any real median nerve damage. You'll have more proximal damage. But distally, probably not. So that's the whole point. That's why you have this braiding. That's what a plexus is. It's a braiding or a weaving together. So you have these nerves coming from different sources that have a common destination, be it the musculocutaneous, the median, the ulnar, the axillary, the radial, or some of the smaller branches that come off more proximal on the brachial plexus. Randy Travis drinks cold beer. Ventral primary rami, C5 through T1. 5 roots become 3 trunks. levels were pretty horizontal, pretty much straight in line. With the limb, because of the rotation to the upper extremity, these dermatomes get stretched, right? So what we do here is we focus more down towards the hand. Okay, there is a pattern that we can go through to give you more of a roundabout picture of the dermatome pattern. Well, let's just work our way down to the hand. Because if you have sensation at the tip of the finger, you've got to have sensation working properly the rest of the way. I think we used the example before. If I'm going to innervate that TV back there, I've got just a series of extension cords from the source, spinal cord, going all the way to that TV. If the TV is on, I know all these cords are working. If that TV is off, I know I've got somebody's pulled something loose somewhere. So then that's when you would start to work your way back. Was it that very last extension cord that was plugged into the TV? Was it somewhere here in the middle? Was it all the way back at the source? If that TV's working, I know I've got a clear connection all the way down, right? So the way we do this is we do something simple. It's a pinprick test to the thumb, to the index finger, to the pinky. When you do that, you're testing C6, C7, and C8, which is right in the middle of the brachial plexus. Because remember, we said C5 through T1. So if you have innervation to the thumb, you got C6. Index finger, you got C7. Pinky, you got C8. Again, right in the middle of the brachial plexus. If you've got sensation downstream, all the extension cords, all the nerves leading to that point have to be intact. Only then, if there is a deficit, do you start to work your way back. And that's where things get a little trickier. That's where you need to understand that pattern. Okay? Again, big picture. C6, C7, C8, downstream distal dermatome innervation. Okay? Thumb, index, and pinky. Now, the muscles. We mentioned deltoid earlier. It's such a big muscle, we will talk about the three major actions for the deltoid because it does run from the spinal scapula, it does run along the acromion, and it does run along the clavicle. So it's got three very specific actions. The posterior part of it that's associated with the spine of the scapula gives you gives you extension of the upper extremity of the shoulder joint. Makes sense. Posterior head gives you true extension. Which means the anterior part of it, which attaches to the clavicle, gives you full flexion of the upper extremity of the shoulder joint. The portion that's out here laterally against the acromion helps to give you some abduction, taking it away from the midline. Abduction. But it does not initiate that abduction. There's another muscle that initiates abduction. Deltoid doesn't kick in until about 20% abducted, and then the deltoid can kick in. Okay, there's another muscle that initiates it, and we'll see in a second. But the big picture actions, flexion of the upper extremity, extension of the upper extremity, and abduction. Okay, that's the three big actions for the deltoid because they all insert on the deltoid tuberosity, one very specific point of the humerus on the lateral side about mid-shaft. You see how wide the origin is for these three different heads, but only one insertion from. Now the rotator cuff. We've already said that the rotator cuff muscles insert on either the greater or the lesser tubule. And those are those two fairly large bumps just below the head of the humerus. Well, I'll tell you now, there's three that insert on the greater. There's only one that inserts on the lesser. The one that inserts on the lesser is the subscapularis. It's the one on the anterior side. Remember, that is the subscapular fossa. So it makes sense that the subscapularis muscle fills that entire fossa and inserts on the lesser tubule. Now, since these are rotator cuff muscles, that means they have some sort of action of rotation of the upper extremity. So the subscapularis is responsible for a lot of medial rotation. And a lot of medial rotation makes sense. This muscle's inserting on the anterior side. Muscle contracts towards the origin, helps to rotate the limb medially. Which means it also helps to pull the limb back towards the midline as well. Helps to adduct it, AD deduct it. Okay? Subscapularis, AD deduction, that initiates abduction, that first 20%. So supraspinatus initiates abduction, and then deltoid can kick in and take it the rest of the way. But without the supraspinatus, you don't get that first 20-ish degrees of abduction. Now below the spine, that's the infraspinous fossa. So you have the large infraspinatus, but you also have another little muscle there called the teres minor. It means the short round. It's actually more like a cylinder, but it is a round cylinder, but it's sort of elongated, kind of like a big chubby pencil that you used to write with in kindergarten. Remember those things where the eraser was huge, you use it one time, and the eraser chunks are all over your table, and you get in trouble, but you throw it in the girl's hair in front of you, or is that just me? That's fine, whatever. So infraspinatus and teres minor, they both insert on the greater tubercle, and they both share very similar actions. Since these guys are inserting on the posterior side, they help to laterally rotate the upper extremity. Laterally rotate upper extremity. But they also help to adduct. They also help to adduct the upper limb as well. So adduction is shared by subscapularis and those two muscles, the infraspinatus and the teres minor. What makes them different is either the medial or the lateral rotation, thus rotator cuff muscles. Okay? Cool? Rotator cuff muscles. Feel good? We have to talk about those guys specifically. Just the way they insert on and around the limb is kind of a big take home point. I'm actually debating on maybe bringing this up. Sounds good, doesn't it? That's it. We still have a little ways to go. There's a couple areas, the quadriangular space, if you can read, you can see this right here, it's called quadriangular space. There's another relationship up here. What we're looking at here is innervation and blood supply to a good bit of the rotator cuff. So, for time's sake, I'm gonna just skip by it, but we talked earlier, big picture, when we said terminal branches, right? We talked about how the axillary nerve innervates two very specific muscles, the teres minor and the deltoid, right? We talked about, what we did not talk about was the innervations of the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. So let's mention that, and then we'll move on. The innervation to the supraspinatus and infraspinatus is called the suprascapular artery. The suprascapular artery. It's not a branch, it's not part of the brachial plexus, it is a branch off of the brachial plexus, specifically off of the upper trunk. So after C5 and C6 merge together at Erb's point, and then we have the full upper trunk, this is a piece or a branch that comes off of the upper trunk that runs towards the back, and that supplies the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. Of course it's important, I mean it's innervating half of the rotator cuff. I'm sorry? Suprascapular. Did I say artery? It's nerve, it's talking innervation. But it's off the upper trunk after C5 and C6 merge together. And that innervates the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. It is a big innervation. It's innervating half of the rotator cuff. And then there are branches called subscapular branches that innervate the subscapularis, and those come off the posterior wall. Kind of like there. Okay. Subscapularis is innervated by subscapular branches off of the posterior wall before it splits into the radial and the axillary nerve is the terminal branch. Okay. Now, big picture. We talked about the anterior compartment of the arm. We mentioned the biceps are here. So, of course, you have the biceps brachii. I actually cut a piece of the belly out so you can see some of the deeper muscles. There's a brachialis muscle back here, as well as a portobrachialis. The names tell you the portoid process of the arm. The take-home point is that this is the flexor compartment of the arm. So when this muscle group contracts as a whole, it's pulling the forearm up towards the arm, which is flexion, right? So the anterior compartment of the arm is the flexor compartment of the arm. It's innervated by the musculocutaneous, one of those terminal branches from the brachial plexus. already said that the radial nerve is nicknamed what? Extensor nerve, bonus points. That's right. It's the extensor nerve, which means it must innervate this extensor compartment. So the radial nerve innervates the posterior compartment of the arm. Now for the forearm, again, we start off on the anterior side. Let's go big picture. On the medial side of the humerus, just medial to the trochlea, you have what's called the medial epicondyle. The medial epicondyle. A condyle is an articulating surface, so something like the trochlea, something like the capitulum. That's a condyle. Epicondyle is an outpouching of bone that doesn't necessarily have an articulation. It's meant more for muscle attachment or ligament attachment. Okay? So the medial epicondyle will give you rise to the flexor compartment within the forearm. So the flexors originate from the medial epicondyle, which means on the next slide you'll see that the extensors originate from the lateral epicondyle. In general, there's some that don't listen to me and follow a little bit further downstream, but for the most part, flexors originate from the medial epicondyle, extensors originate from the lateral. Now, the forearm muscles, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them have a lot of long names, right? But what we like to say is that these names actually tell you quite a bit about themselves. And we don't have the time today to go through each individual one of these. But I want to tell you some of them just so you can kind of listen to these names and process it a little bit. The first one that you're seeing here, you've got muscles called pronator teres. It's the long round muscle that helps to pour that bowl of soup out, right? Pronator teres. The next one in line is flexor carpi radialis. What are we saying? We're saying it's a flexor that inserts on the carpal bones on the radial side. That's not so bad, right? Which means the one that's all the way on the other side of that is the flexor carpi ulnaris. It's a flexor that inserts on the carpal bones on the ulnar side. Then there's one in the middle called the palmaris longus. It attaches to a structure on the palm called the palmar aponeurosis. So if you remember, just in general, these are the flexors. The names tell you they're flexors. It's not so bad now. Okay? Now you can break down each individual muscle when they act independently versus when they act as a group. But for our purposes today, we're going to use them as a group. When these muscles contract, they help to flex the hand of the wrist joint. Okay, so these are flexors of the hand of the wrist joint. Some of these continue downstream into the hand, down towards the digits, and they have separate actions for the fingers. But as a group right now, in the forearm, they are flexors of the hand of the wrist joint. Okay? Now you can take this a step deeper within the forearm. So we've taken that first group away that we just talked about. The names of these, you'll see that these are now stretching down towards the digits. There's one that's a little bit more superficial, there's one that's a little bit more deep. It goes to the second through the fifth digit. So these are called the flexor digitorum superficialis. And the deep is called profundus, so flexor digitorum profundus. Superficialis being here, and then the next level deeper is the profundus. Now these guys tell you what, flexor digitorum, it tells you that they are going to the digits. So they have something, some sort of impact, either on the pip joint or the dip joint, the digits. But in the forearm, they are crossing through the wrist, traveling down to the hand. So these guys are still flexing the hand of the wrist joint as well. So within the forearm, these are hand flexors. There's also one that goes to the thumb, flexor pollicis longus. Pollex is the fancy word for thumb. So anytime you hear pollex or pollicis, it's in reference to the thumb. So you have flexors that travel downstream that go out towards the thumb. Collectively, when all of this group of the forearm acts together, it's still flexing the hand of the wrist joint. If you isolated just that muscle, you would just flex the thumb. Okay? Big picture stuff. Big picture. You're also introduced to a structure called the flexor retinaculum. The flexor retinaculum, which is also called the transverse carpal ligament, because they sound so much alike. Transverse carpal ligament. This is the roof of the carpal tunnel. So if you guys, I'm sure you've heard of carpal tunnel syndrome. Some of you may have retinaculum that covers those carpal bones, forming a tunnel. That's why it's called the carpal tunnel. Now there's 10 things that pass through there. And you're crazy if you don't think you're going to see this in 2 weeks. There's 10 things that pass through the carpal tunnel. The 4 tendons of the flexor digitorum superficialis counts as 4. 4 tendons of the flexor digitorum superficialis. The 4 tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus. So that's 8. Right? Flexor digitorum profundus. The flexor pollicis longus, the one that goes to the thumb, that's 9. And the last thing that travels through is the median nerve. Remember we said median nerve is responsible for a lot of the forearm, but also does a little bit in the hand. So the 4 tendons of the flexor digitorum superficialis, the 4 for the profundus, flexor pollicis longus, and the median nerve. That's the 10 things that pass through the carpal tunnel. So carpal tunnel itself is a very small area. So it's amazing that more people don't have carpal tunnel issues because these tendons have to ball up around themselves just to be able to pass through. And then the nerve is sandwiched in there as well. So any kind of inflammation that gets in there, any kind of insult, it's got nowhere to go really. 2/3 of it is bone. So you're not going to push the carpal bones out of the way if you're going to swell. So you're going to push out against that flexor retinaculum. Okay? It's pretty strong. It's very strong. So there's not a whole lot of give to it at all. So at that point, you're focusing all of that pressure inward. So it pushes against the muscles, which is painful. Pushes against the nerve, which is painful, but it's more of a numbing agent at that point. You're damaging the downstream muscles. Okay?
So the tunnel syndrome that happens when you use mouse too much is actually pushing on that nerve.
It is, yeah. But repetitive use of the digits is one of the common things that they say causes carpal tunnel syndrome. And it does to a point, but it's not like my mom's secretary from the 30s. Never had carpal tunnel syndrome, not once. She fights up the champ, all the time. Never had any issue. Some people within 2 weeks of taking that type of job have carpal tunnel issues. So it's because of those type of positions like the secretary that we now have the ergonomic mouse, the ergonomic keyboard, things like that. It's because of those issues here in the past 20 years or so. Somebody else have a question? Now, if you flip this over to the posterior side of the forearm, remember we said that the extensors originate from the lateral epicondyle and then continue downstream to the forearm and the hand. These are extensors. Radial nerve is doing this thing because it's the extensor nerve. A lot of these names look fairly similar. There are some differences, but look at the names. Extensor carpi radialis, except now there's a longus and a brevis. Okay, so you got 2. But what do the names tell you? Extensor carpi radialis. It's an extensor that inserts on the carpal bones on the radial side. And there just happens to be 2 of them. Extensor carpi ulnaris. It's an extensor inserts on the carpal bones on the ulnar side. I don't want to talk to you like you guys are kids, but the names tell you everything you need to know. And if you just listen to the names, you can make a lot more sense of this. When this group acts together, it extends the hand to wrist joint. Right? This is the extensor group, so when it acts together, it extends the hand to wrist joint. There's an extensor digitorum. Notice it's not a superficialis or profundus, it's just extensor digitorum. So not only will it help you to extend your digits, but when it acts with the forearm group, it helps to extend the hand to wrist joint as well. But it also tells you that you do much more forceful flexion of the fingers than you do extension. That's why you have twice as many muscles associated with flexion than extension. Right? So again, the names tell you a lot. Big picture. A deeper group within this posterior side travels more towards the index finger and thumb. extensor digiti minimi, digiti quinti, that only goes to the fifth digit. So some of those people that drink and the pinky comes up, it's not your fault. There's another muscle there that makes that happen. It doesn't mean you're snobby, okay? It just happens. But the fact that it's called mini-me, and it's the little pinky, I always think back to Austin Powers. If you have any Austin Powers fans, I don't think they were that forward thinking with it. I think it was just sort of blind luck. Now for the hand itself, we mentioned earlier the palmar aponeurosis. It's this thick structure that the palmaris longus attaches to. The thick structure for the palm, the purpose of it is not for that palmaris longus. The purpose of it is to provide structure and support, protection for the deeper structures within the hand, the intrinsics of the hand, the superficial, the deep palmar arches within the hand. Okay? So it does provide some structure, but it also provides sort of an attachment point for some of these muscles. We will look over here at the thumb, and we're introduced to a group of three muscles. You only see two on this slide, there's one is deeper. But this group of muscles associated with the thumb is called the thenar, Thenar. The thenar muscles. There's one that's an abductor, there's one that's a flexor, and there's one that's deep, that's an opponens. It's an opposer of the thumb. The first two that you see is the abductor pollicis brevis. Brevis means short. These are very specific muscles, so we'll talk about it specifically just for a second. Abductor pollicis brevis. Flexor pollicis brevis. Okay, so abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and then directly deep to that is the opponens pollicis. You see that here. Opponens pollicis. Now the reason that they call the abductor and the flexor a brevis means that there's a longus, right? There's a maximus, there's a medius, there's a minimus. If there's a major, there's a minor. Okay? So we have long muscles coming from other areas. We have short muscles that are intrinsics within the hand that are doing these actions. But for the opponents, we just call it opponens pollicis. There ain't no backup plan. Okay? Opposition of the thumb is what makes us different than basically, I don't know, everything else on this planet. Okay, so it's kind of the opposable thumb. I know you guys have heard of this before, right? The opposable thumb. Because of that 90-degree rotation for the thumb, it allows for this action to take place. And this is a muscle that causes it to take place. Opposition of the thumb is simply taking the pad of the thumb and touching it to the pad of the digits. That's opposition of the thumb. Holding a pencil, picking up a coffee cup. Okay? Those are opposition. There's other muscles that can get you close to opposition, but they don't give you true opposition. That's the opponens pollicis that does that. And there's a tiny little nerve here called the recurrent branch of the median. Just call it median recurrent, that's short. Median recurrent. It tells you it comes from the median nerve. Recurrent means it recurs or it circles back around. Okay? It's a tiny branch off of the median that goes through the carpal tunnel, right? When it goes through the carpal tunnel. And then it circles back around and innervates this compartment. What we're saying is that carpal tunnel syndrome is pressure inside the carpal tunnel. So that means we've damaged this part of the extension cord. So from downstream, you've got some issues, you've got deficits. Median recurrent nerve can be damaged with carpal tunnel syndrome. So not only do you have sensation problems, now you have motor problems, specifically motor problems with the thumb, since we're talking about that thenar compartment. So you guys kind of putting that together a little bit here, hopefully. I know we're getting a little bit late. We got 10 minutes. A step deeper to the thenar compartment is just called the adductor pollicis, the adductor pollicis. It's the muscle that helps to bring the thumb back down towards the palm. If you're able to abduct it, you've got to adduct it. And this is the adductor. It's a two-headed muscle that has a very narrow insertion. It is a step deeper in the palm, just below the thenar compartment. Okay? Just a few. Now these guys are called the lumbricals. We're kind of taking this as a superficial to a deeper extends the digit by extending the IP joints. So not only are you flexing the MCP joint, you're extending the IP joint. So that's why the lumbricals are nicknamed the bye-bye muscles. Nobody waves bye-bye like this, right? Wave bye-bye, wave bye. Flexion of the MCP joint, or don't wave bye. MCP joint. But it extends the IP joints. Those are lumbricals that are responsible for that. Flexion and extension. But because of the insertion of those muscles, that's how you get the flexion and the extension. Flexion of the MCP, but extension of both the hip and the hip joints. Now, the deepest layer of muscle that we have on the palm are the palmar interosseous. You'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3 of them. The middle finger does not have one. The reason is that when we talk about the hand and we think of abduction or adduction and adduction take place from the midline of something. The middle finger is the midline. So these muscles on the palmar side are responsible for adduction, adduction. Okay? So since the middle finger is midline, you can't bring something that's already true midline back to the midline that's already there. So that's why the middle finger does not have a palmar interosseous. It's helping to bring the index, the ring finger, the pinky finger back to the midline. So the way we think about this is pad, palmar, ADD duct, pad, PAD, palmar adduct. They bring the fingers, the second through the fifth digit, back to the middle finger, back to the midline. Thumb's a different animal, remember? 90 degrees different. Actions look different than the second through the fifth digit. So the thumb's not included here. Which means on the dorsal side, if the palmar were the adductors, the dorsal are the abductors. So now this is dab. This was dab before dab was cool, right? This is old school dab. Pad and dab, dorsal, abduct. We take fingers away from the midline. Biggest difference now is that you see there's 4, not 3. The middle finger now has 2 of them. One attaches to it on either side. So everybody flip me off, show me your road rage finger, isolate.